So you might be wondering, why am I filling my diesel tank with water? It's a very good question. Why am I filling my diesel tank with water? Well, it's because, let me show you. This is the pallet I had my diesel tank sitting on. And as you can see, it's wet and oily. That's diesel fuel. That pallet with both of my slip tanks on it was sitting over here on my trailer all winter, or a good part of the winter. Wet and oily, covered in diesel. That's never going to come out of those boards. Question is why? And the answer is there's a leak in my tank. And at first, I'd really hoped I could just do a simple little JB weld fix. But the problem is it's on the bottom of the tank, which, where leaks happen. And at first I thought it was just a pinhole. It would have been fine. We could have JB welded and we would have been fine. But it turns out there's a crack that's almost 2 inches long. And the bottom of these tanks basically have a ridge molded into the bottom, 2 of them that run the length of the tank that act as feet for the tank. And there's and I'll show you in a bit here, but there's a dent in one of those ridges and a kind of a gouge. Must have hit it with the fork of the tractor. At first I thought that's where the pinhole was. But as it turns out, whatever hit it hard enough to crack the tank. That's beyond a JB weld fix because the bottom of the tank is going to flex quite a bit. Just, as you fill it up with fuel, the metal will flex. As you move the tanks around, it'll flex. Even if you don't move them around, as you draw fuel out of the tank, it's going to change shape a little bit because you're reducing or adding weight to the tank. If I take the tank to the pump to fill it up, it'll flex. And JB weld's just going to crack off of there. So, why am I adding water? Because I got to weld this thing. I'm not a big fan of welding vessels with fuel gases inside. So, the only way to ensure that I've dispelled all diesel fumes is to fill it with water. So that's what I'm doing. It's a 100-gallon tank. It's going to take a little while to fill. So I'm going to fill it with water, then I'm going to dump it, then I'm going to weld it. That's the story. Well, I probably should have added a bit more video in here because I filled it with water. I went out and dumped it, flipped it upside down. Basically, I'm ready to weld. All I got to do now is bring it back to the shop and grind it, weld it, flap disc it smooth, and paint it. I mean, there's a few more steps. But anyway, I got the 100 gallons filled, got it dumped. There shouldn't be any diesel fume residue left in the tank. We should be good to go. Well, sometimes it has to get ugly before it gets better. But as soon as I started welding, I blew holes, which means that the metal had gotten pretty thin here. So, or else it's a manufacturing defect, but it was paper thin. So I got to build it up and it's very thin, so it takes a bit of time. It's got to get ugly before it gets pretty. Well, it ended up being a bit of a busy day towards the end. I didn't have time to do the whole camera montage thing, but here is how it wound up. Not the prettiest weld. I guess I figured out why my tank cracked. In this corner, for whatever reason, the material is quite thin. So as soon as I started welding, I did a pass with the welder. I went with my flap disc to smooth it out, and I went through the material so quick. And I had to weld up a bunch of really, really thin spots. I don't know why they're so thin, but I had to be very, very careful. And so I had to build it up quite a bit. It's not pretty because I like to flap disc all my welds really, really smooth. But every time I did, I was getting down through the material too fast. So I built it up, smoothed it out just a wee little bit, painted it, and that's all we're gonna do. I am concerned there's going to be a bit of slag inside the tank and a bit of grinding grit. But there's a filter on the pump. I'll trust that it'll catch it. And that's it. So my tank is fixed.